The way we get around is changing, and how we view it is too. Disruptive technologies are enabling new experiences. Concerns about growing congestion and pollution need to be balanced with having to get from one place to another. So, what can we expect the future of mobility to look like? At EY, we've collaborated with multiple industries to understand their collective visions for the future. But to envision them, a little imagination is required. Imagine a world of ultimate personal freedom, where people care and share. Even though the vehicles may be autonomous transport pods, their owners will still cherish them, as they are highly personalized and customized, based on their lifestyle, hobbies, mood, and activity. Not only that, but in this world they also own a share of their local transport service and infrastructure too, reducing cost and improving quality. But others saw the possibility for something different than this. Cities where cars, consumer goods, and even homes are shared and rented by the hour. Owning things is shunned. Modes of transport are still autonomous, but personalization is limited. They would operate under subscriptions such as economy, which offer low costs but slower journeys. Or a premium for speed, luxury vehicles, or even last-minute convenience, like dry cleaning. Some imagine a world where vehicles are owned, but usage is regulated to avoid congestion and pollution, especially within urban areas. Here, no private cars are permitted in city areas. Rather, they're used for longer distance travel between cities. The transfer from private to shared modes of transportation will be easy and convenient through the use of slick technology and logistics. Some could see people no longer wishing to own a vehicle whatsoever. Not for ideological reasons, but simply because there's no need. The mobility services provided are cheaper, faster, and less of a hassle. Mobility is based on the quickest route using all modes of transportation: train, bus, car. It all becomes a true experience, personal and ideal. But regardless of all their striking similarities, there's still no guarantee any one of these worlds will even exist. What is guaranteed is that the journey to the next era of mobility has already begun. So the real question isn't what it will look like, it's how will you shape the future to succeed in it.
Sejam todos muito bem-vindos a esta nossa conferência sobre o futuro da mobilidade, no âmbito do programa Beyond. O programa Beyond é um conjunto de iniciativas que nós na UI fazemos à volta da temática da digitalização da nossa economia, e a nossa sessão hoje insere-se num pilar setorial do Beyond, precisamente de mobilidade. Dentro de mobilidade do Beyond, fazemos iniciativas de diferentes formatos, tendencialmente sessões mais pequenas, pequeno almoços executivos, cada um focado em um ecossistema dos múltiplos que constituem este vasto universo da mobilidade, mas dado o caráter multissetorial do tema, achamos que ainda há valor para fazer uma sessão mais alargada como uma conferência de hoje. Regra geral, fazemos num relativo pouco ruído no mercado, muito focados em termos as empresas e as pessoas certas em cada sessão, e é com especial contentamento que vemos uma sala que representa muitos dos principais relevantes atores, executivos e empresas da mobilidade em Portugal. Para hoje, em termos de agenda, o objetivo não é muito revisitarmos porque é que a oferta de transportes é cada vez mais intermodal, ou a importância de dados como o ingrediente base de novas ofertas que têm vindo a acontecer neste espaço, novas propostas de valor, novos modelos de negócio, rail sharing, car sharing, real-time delivery, etc. Nem tão pouco a importância de perceber os nossos clientes e a importância de de social media, e se o Facebook fosse um país, seria a quarta economia do mundo. Até isso, nós, consultores, sabemos. O objetivo, da forma como estruturamos a agenda, passa muito por 3 pilares. Facilitar a discussão setor público e setor privado. Todos estamos conscientes da importância do ente público, independentemente de câmaras municipais, áreas metropolitanas ou parte central, como um ator crítico, fazendo o papel de alguém que era um regulador ou de ativos e infraestrutura para, crescentemente, um facilitador de mobilidade, com ações concretas que têm impacto na mobilidade, quer seja, como exemplos, o congestion charge, que muda muito a dinâmica da logística urbana, ou a importância de termos caps em termos de licenças de táxis, ou no futuro de robotáxis, para incentivar o uso de viatura partilhada. Ou então também por regulação concreta, que está na base de decisões de investimento dos entes públicos, e aqui a logística urbana é outro bom exemplo. Primeiro pilar. Segundo pilar, discussão entre incumbentes, mas novos entrantes de outras indústrias e startups. Também num contexto de uma indústria que estava muito focada na produção de um ativo, de viatura, para crescentemente fornecimento de um serviço, de Mobility as a Service. Essa discussão é crítica para a maturidade de novas propostas de valor atingirem a escala necessária. E, por fim, também, em termos concretos e com um nível de detalhes relevante, a ativação de novas tecnologias incorporadas já em sistemas de transporte. E sem mais demora, eu pedia-vos para me acompanharem a dar as boas-vindas ao vereador Miguel Gaspar, vereador de Mobilidade da Câmara Municipal de Lisboa. Só uma nota, por favor, vereador. Alguns dos speakers perguntaram se a sessão podia ser em português ou em inglês. Deixamos ao critério de cada um como quiserem. Obrigado.
Bom dia a todos. Antes de mais, agradecer o convite para estar aqui hoje. É um gosto, é sempre um gosto estar junto de vós e ter estes momentos em que podemos discutir novas ideias na área da mobilidade. Eu tenho só uma primeira pergunta, que é qual é que é a tecnologia que vamos usar para mudar slides? Se bate palmas, se tem um comandozinho? Muito bem, impecável. Pronto, assim já estou mais em casa. Se não se importarem, eu ia mesmo falar em inglês. Todo o programa foi-me apresentado em inglês. Sei que há pessoas inglesas na sala e eu tenho sempre este princípio que acho que é mais simpático se todos nos entendermos. Nesta plateia, eu julgo que não se fará problema, so if you don't mind, I'll change for English from now on. So, good morning, and good morning to you all. My name is Miguel Gaspar. I'm Deputy Mayor for Mobility and Safety from the City of Lisbon. Since the last weekend, I'm also responsible for the smart cities, so I get the full package of these new things that are happening in the cities. And I'm here to share my perspective of what's the role of the city in the mobility of the future. I would like to start to something that, it's a concept that we are working, which is wise mobility. Why wise? Well, because to be wise, you have to show some experience, to have some knowledge, and to have some good judgment. You have to be sensible or prudent, and especially you have to know how to act. Synonyms of wise is intelligent and it's informed. And it's exactly the opposite of stupid, silly, and foolish. So, in our opinion, it's very important that the mobility of the future should be actually wiser. And to be honest, for many decades, we are losing less the word wise, and finally, we are using a bit more. So I think society is going in the right direction regarding this concept of wise mobility. Well, I always like to start with this. Some of you already speaking about this, but for me it's very important to start here, to start in the Paris Agreement. Because the Paris Agreement was not that long ago, and we as a society, with a strong commitment with the next generations regarding mobility and regarding what we have to do to have a better world. We said in Portugal that we should cut transport emissions by 26% by 2030. This will not happen if cities don't change. Also, 1 year afterwards, in COP22, the Prime Minister of Portugal said that Portugal will become carbon neutral by 2050, so an extra pressure on this agenda. When you look how well we are doing, I wouldn't say better than the Secretary General of the UN that was here last February, actually 1 year ago, and where he said there is the risk of losing the race against the climate change. We need stronger ambition. This was just 1 year ago when, looking what we are doing, we are saying that we are not doing enough. It's not the unique global commitment that we have made. If you look to the UN and to the UN development goals, and you look to the 21st, to the 11th goal, you see that by 2030 we have committed to have better transportation accessible for all in the cities. Transport should be safer, we should have more public transport, and we should protect the vulnerable users, kids, elderly, and women all over the world. I could spend hours discussing what is accessible and sustainable transport. I will not do it here today. But being accessible means that it exists, means that everyone can enter, and means that everyone can pay for it. So it's something that if we set this target as a society, it's something that should make us think a bit about. Before these goals, we already have set another ones in the white paper for transport in 2011, where we said that by 2030, we would cut by half the number of conventional fuel cars in our cities. We will have CO2-free logistics by 2030, in 10 years. And we will have no traditional engine car by 2050. We said more. We said by 2020, so tomorrow, we'll have a multimodal platform, payment platform all over Europe, where you could pay for public transport all over Europe. And we said that by 2050, we'll have zero deaths in the road, and by 2030, by 2020, we'll cut by half this number of deaths in the road. This is very important because basically, this is putting pressure on 2030. And 2030, it's actually something that should make us think, because when you put it in perspective, you actually can count the years that are coming to 2030. I usually say that in the city time frame, 1 day of the city, it's 10 years. So we have roughly 1 day to do something to reach 2030. 2017 was when I started to be deputy mayor, and is gone. 2018 is gone. Put it in perspective, we have 3 more governments to reach 2030. We have 3 more mayors to reach 2030. And in the specific European context, we have something that we cannot forget, which is we only have 1 more EU framework program to fund the change that we want to do in our cities. Also, putting at a societal level, if you look to the Portuguese families, usually if a Portuguese family keeps its car for 7 years. So to achieve that kind of numbers, to say that by 2030, half of the cars will be non-conventional, this will mean that when I end my term by 2021, half of the room, the next car that you are going to buy, it's either electric or hydrogen or something else. And are you ready for that change? So the point is, if you want to reach the targets of 2030, it's really time to act. And that's we need a revolution in mobility. We don't need an evolution, we don't need a transition, we don't need a step forward. We need a revolution in mobility. And that should be the proper mindset that we all should have in our organizations if we want to achieve the targets that we have committed with the next generations. In the city of Lisbon, we went for elections with that program, Lisboa Precisa de Todos, and it's written in that program that we should foster for better quality of life and better environment, and for that we need accessible mobility to everyone's reach. It is written on this document, which is now today the government document of the city of Lisbon, that it's important to promote solutions that reduce the dependence of the private car, so create alternatives to the private car, but it's also written that we only achieve that by having a combined management of all road modes, parking, municipal, police. So if we put everything working together, the traffic lights, the urban logistics, everything managed together to achieve these targets. This is written in the document that it's actually our government document. So this is our policy regarding these topics for the next years till 2021 as a city. To understand what we need to do, it's also important just to have a quick mindset together of us all. So what we should do in the specific context of the city of Lisbon. I will not spend too much time on these slides, but these slides, these 6 topics, show the main pressure points for the city of Lisbon. Basically, we have the urban design of Lisbon metropolitan area, where for decades people went to live out of the city of Lisbon instead of living inside the city of Lisbon. Basically, today, 2/3 of the people that work in the city of Lisbon do not live in the city of Lisbon. And this is something that is not very common. It's a pressure point that is not very common in cities all over the world. Of course, we have growth of traffic flows growing inside Lisbon, and it's very interesting to see. When you look to the A5, for instance, the highway, it's growing 1.5% per year. When you look to IC19, coming from Sintra and Amadora, it's growing 5% per year. This shows also the impact that for the unemployment and now the employment is having, especially in the middle class of the Portuguese people, that now that the economy is booming, those areas of the metropolitan area where the low income and average income people live are actually the ones that are growing more in mobility because people are coming to work to the city of Lisbon. We have a prevalence and dependency of the private vehicle. The private vehicle is still, the car is winning model split for the past 30 years. We have a reduction of the public transport usage till a couple of years ago. We have a complexity of urban logistics and inefficient enforcement. Probably half of the traffic that you have today in the city of Lisbon, it's all about urban logistics. And we have a lack of integration in planning at the metropolitan level. When you look to the numbers and when you look to the greater Lisbon, we see here basically the public transport, it's basically coming to half in the last 30 years, as I said, and the car was still growing. Well, all of you know these numbers, but something good is happening in the city of Lisbon, because when you look to the same numbers in the city of Lisbon, we have the same topic here regarding public transport, but the cars we are stopping this movement. We are stabilizing the use of the car, and more important, we are growing a lot in the soft mode and active modes. Why? Because in the past 10 years, we have an active policy of changing the urban space, and today, it's much more easier to walk in the city of Lisbon, much more easier to access the local commerce in the city of Lisbon. It's much easier to ride a bike in the city of Lisbon. So the transformation of the use space that we have made in the past 10 years actually is showing some results. So this is the model split as a key indicator, and this is where we are today for the city of Lisbon. And when we compare ourselves with other cities, we know that as a policy, we have to bring the use of the car to 1/3 of the global trips. This means that 66% have to use other modes. And I don't say public transport because I know it's other modes. It's the shared modes, it's the public transport, it's everything else. But to do that, we need to shift every day 150,000 people from their car to something else. And that, of course, you cannot only do with public transport because it's the only thing that has the density to transport just an amount of people. However, if public transport will be the solution, it will have been for the past 30 years, and we see the results. So we think we need something more. And something more, it's the active mobility and it's the shared modes. And we have to combine all these things together to actually have a good enough alternative to actually people believe that they have something else, probably in a mobility as a service, that provides as good mobility as their own private car. And so that's what we have to work on to provide alternatives to people that they do the proper choice. So what we are doing as a city, and what's, in my opinion, the role of the public sector where we should position ourselves. I'm just going to give some examples of key drivers of transformation that we are following in the city of Lisbon, just for the discussion and to see what we can do together around it. First of all, a transformation of the public space. I won't spend too much time on this, but only the public side can transform the public space because we plan the public space, we design the public space, we authorize the public space, so only public authorities can change the public space. And you cannot change mobility if you don't change the public space. This is an example of the city of Lisbon, actually right here on 24 de Julho, and you see how it was before and how it is today. So basically, from a space of 74% to the car, we came to 42% of the car, and we create space for pedestrians and green spaces. I don't spend too much time here because I don't think it's the proper place to discuss this topic. But my point is, if you don't change the public space of cities, you won't change mobility in the cities. So cities have to do that. Public transport. As I told you, I strongly believe that you can only have better mobility in the world in the future if you have better public transport. And we had a huge lack of public funding in the Portuguese public transport sector. In 2015, we have 10% of public funding on the public transport sector in the metropolitan area of Lisbon. If you compare to Berlin, Berlin has around 55%. If you compare to Barcelona, 35%. If you compare to Madrid, it's around 50%. If you compare to Paris, it's around 60%. So we have our public transport was underfunded in the metropolitan area. And what we are doing, it's bringing back the investment. So basically, in Lisbon, we are buying more than 300 low-emission buses that is going to change mobility. We are doubling the tram capacity. We are bringing more to 20% the transport network of the metropolitan area. And we are building new underground stations and new rolling stock. All these decisions only the public side can do. And we have to find ways how to fund public transport and to have a high-quality public transport that offers an alternative to others. But this one, it's actually quite important, in my opinion, for the private sector. Because we need to open the traditional public transport sector to new solutions of ticketing and access. And this is so important that we already have, since January, post-paid solutions, and we are moving for mobile ticketing in a way that opens the access to the public transport to third parties. It brings us from solutions that are based on ticketing, on heavy ticketing systems, to account-based solutions. And this, it's much more flexible to push for mobility as a service, to push for others that probably will treat their customer better than we traditionally have done, to find new ways of communicate this product, which is public transport, bundle it together in other things, and push it forward. Since we have this decision and we already have these products, it's much more easier to actually achieve this and to do a step forward in that direction. There was in the past, there was a thought that people think, well, we are the ones that are here. We are monopolists as public transport operators. So all the mobility solutions has to be driven from us. Now I think there is a change in mentality. We understand that public transport operators need to operate very well, but they can open their customer service, if you want to others that actually do it better. And it's something that transforms a lot the way that we can manage our system. Moving forward, we have a school card and kids are having free access to the transport, to the public transport system. This is very important to change behaviors, but it's also very important from a technology perspective. Because once we put the kids till less than 12 years old inside the system, he has a login in the public transport sector if you want to. So basically, this brings a lot of opportunities to look at like OpenID principles, where we create, as a city, we create a relationship with that citizen at an early stage, and through his growth, we are still discussing with him. In the near future, I think it's very possible that someone at home turns on its TV or looks to its app and sees, well, my bus is arriving to take me to my school, and today we have spaghetti with meatballs in the city in our meal, because everything is together, and we are providing better information, but specific information to that family, to that behavior, and to provide it with better solutions. Also, a strategic decision to create this metropolitan pass. From the next 1st of April, the public transport costs will come from 120 euros in some parts of the metropolitan area, 140, 70 to 40 euros. With a ticket of 40 euros, you can access from any point to any point of the metropolitan area. Why is this so important? Again, because it strongly enables mobility as a service products. Because you know that with only one fare, 40 euros, if you combine this fare inside your mobility product, you have full access in the metropolitan transport network, instead of what you had before, which is 2,030 different 300 different fares. So the catalog of fares, the pricing schemes are now much more easier to use inside the public transport, and this strongly enables mobility as a service. And again, these kind of decisions can only be made by the public side when you think who decides the price and who funds the public transport system. Another hot topic is more and more we are lacking logos here because we have more and more services on this area in the city of Lisbon. We are building a mobility ecosystem in the city of Lisbon. There is a new transport mode in the city, which is the smartphone. The smartphone actually enables you to go from A to B. And people don't care if they go by a shared car, if they go by, well, people that choose scooters and bicycles really want to choose bicycles and scooters. But when you choose My Taxi, when you choose Uber, when you choose public transport, people don't care that much what's the solution that takes them from A to B. What they want is to look to the smartphone and actually access something that takes them in the most convenient way from A to B. And if you still have battery in the smartphone, you'll probably be able to go from A to B. And so that's something that we should foster as a city. And in the city of Lisbon, we are happy to say that we have a lot of more and more operators of the shared modes that brings a critical mass that people understand that in these kind of options, they have a real alternative to their car. And something that we have monthly meetings with these operators. Every month there is a meeting in the city hall with these operators. And we have an agreement that everyone agrees that we are not in the competition phase. We are in the phase that we need to build the critical mass. We are not competing. We are providing alternatives to people. And so we have to promote all the operators, all the transport modes in a way that actually we have a real alternative that can change the need of the private car of families. This ecosystem has something that, for me, it's the most important thing that in the concept of cities on the next 10 years. In the concept of cities of the next 10 years, I strongly believe that cities have to become from infrastructure managers, that's what they have been for the past decades, to mobility managers. And this step, which is a huge step, means that we have to access to more information. If you look to the specific context of the city of Lisbon, we have full access of traffic lights, and we are making a huge investment to becoming more smarter and more connected traffic light system. We have the municipal company Carris, which has bus and trams. We have ML, which has the on-street and off-street parking, part of off-street parking, and we have the bike sharing scheme. We have the traffic police, which is also municipal. We manage the infrastructure, and now we are connecting the shared modes, the urban logistics, and other mobility service that is appearing. And all this has to be connected in a mobility, in the control management center for mobility in the city of Lisbon, which we are literally building right now. And this also, if this level, it's at an operational level, at this level, we also can bring data and create mobility labs where through open data, we can create sandboxes and create places where innovation can be fostered. So why do we want this? We want this to actually create connected services, to create a new language between cities and private operators that is common everywhere. We have made a decision to open the back office of a parking company that basically third parties can check in and check out in the on-street solution. This means that more and more we'll have more information. When I speak with OEMs, they tell me that their cars that are coming out of the shop right now, they can count the free spots in the city based on the parking sensors that they have. Well, if as a city, if I could gather all that data together, I could say, well, those BMW cars told me that, Toyota cars told me that, Volkswagen cars told me that. If I put the information all together, I can push back the number of free spaces that are available in the city. That's the kind of things that only cities can do because they are the neutral part. They are not competing. They are managing their own public space, which is, their reason to exist. So we are the neutral part that can get sensible data, process it, and push it back to with added value to the sector, so everyone can benefit from that data, and that's a role that only cities can do. So what we also, on the second level, what we are doing, it's actually promoting cooperative innovation and adding value to the mobility ecosystem. Some examples, we are working with Waze, we are working with Volkswagen, we are working, we intend to work with projects like CityMapper, where we are dealing what can we do with open data, what can we do, well, that school mobility app is an app that Volkswagen showed interest to develop in a way, I'm not sure if you are aware of, but we have a model split of 20% on cars for normal people, if you want this. Not normal people, but people don't have kids, and 70% when you have kids. So having kids, it's a huge thing when making a mobility decision. If you go to the private schools, the model splits it 70% by car. If you go for the public schools, it's 30% by car that kids reach to school. Why? Of course, there is also proximity reasons. Public school usually closer to your home. It's by definition, by law, than it is a private school. But it's something that should make us think about, because, in my opinion, kids are spending too much time inside a bubble, which is the car. So it's something that we should change, and we should think about it. So also on-demand public transport solutions and road and mobility services status. We have more and more APIs. One API that we have, a public API that anyone can connect, it's the road closures that we have in the city of Lisbon. So anyone can connect to that and use that information to improve their efficiency. And only the city has that information, and in my opinion, it's our obligation to make it public, to make it accessible for all. So more and more, we are opening our information, creating public APIs for parking availability, parking sensors, what the time for the next bus, things like that only us can do. When speaking about the shared modes, I think it's very important to, these next 3 slides, I think it's key to understand the mindset of cities. I told you before that we need to shift 150,000 people from the car. I think I don't have much more time, more 5 minutes probably. Less than that? Okay, I'll run up. So 150,000 people that we want to change from the cars. This means these people can use 50,000 cars, can use 15,000 bikes, can have 10,000 drive nows, maybe even autonomous and electric, but still 10,000 cars, or can use 5,000 Uber pool or 5,000 taxi match because they are ride sharing. They can use 150 buses, they can use 30 trains. So the proper right mix is essential. Where we have the high density flows, we have to go for public transport because it's much more efficiency at managing people. But we need the rest to the rest of the territory. Why cities don't like some new mobility services? And this was a question that was made to me because we are so open in the city of Lisbon and we like so much new stuff. People ask me, but aren't you concerned? And when you look to Barcelona, it's it's a beacon for mobility in what's doing well, and they are closing everything. It's making hard life for Uber, for mobility service. They are closing. So why? This is the system, the transport fares revenue in the metropolitan area in 2017. If we, public authorities, if we have a 10% loss of the system because these new mobility services are coming in, basically, if we lost 10% of our revenues, we are losing, putting in perspective, 5% of the Lisbon of city budget, and it's by far the biggest budget in Portugal. We have losing, put it in perspective, 33% of the subway, of the public company, or you will be 20% of the revenues of the intermunicipal bus network. Basically, if we lose 10%, we are losing too much money because the city of Lisbon is paying 30 million euros every year to Carris to fund their public service. If we lose 43 million, our expense will go up. So that's why cities close the system. However, if we could actually change this and work together to have a 10% gain, well, basically happy faces. So this is what we have to do. We have to find ways to work together, to foster complementary modes. So we have to solve the last mile, and we have to develop, the solution, in my opinion, is to develop products on top of a public transport tariff. If you take my customer, but if you leave the money, it's okay. So if we can actually create products where the basic transport fare, the 40 euros transport fare, it's part of your mobility product, and 40 euros in the budget of 300, 400, 500, which is the budget of the car, it's nothing. Then you have relaxed cities to deal with. Or, of course, you can go for other ways where you get royalties per tip somehow, congestion charging somehow, but you create a revenue, an extra revenue, that you give part of the meat, you get part of the money, and then you fund the bone if you want the public transport with these kind of resources. So this is the kind of things that cities can do actually to ease. I just want to finally to tell you that we strongly foster innovation. This was to speak about scooters. So basically when you don't know the concept and we don't know what is the impact of scooters in e-scooters in the cities. Lime arrived in Lisbon in October. If I want to regulate and approve a regulation, by the time I have the regulation approved, it will be obsolete because it will be wrong on its fundamentals. That's why we need soft regulation and to have an approach of dialogue and implementing rules as we are learning together. Of course, we have to always defend public safety and safeguard, but then we have to have full disclosure on real-time data so that we can actually have data and decide your decisions on reality and not on feelings. And then go for database regulation with a strong multi-stakeholder engagement. This is the kind of data that we are getting for all the e-scooters, but it's kind of confidential. So this is why we are looking to the data of the shared bikes, which is actually ours, and it's not. I have more. This one I can show you. But we have the exactly same data for all the scooters operating in the city of Lisbon. We know where they are, the trips they do, how many trips they do, and this enables us to understand the phenomenon and deal with it. We have programs for entrepreneurs to use city as a living lab. And we have more than that. We are opening core services in our back office to give access to mobility products and to foster new solutions with public APIs that people can have access to data, develop new products, and come to Lisbon to experiment new things. This is the last Smart Open Mobility initiative. We had many people coming from abroad. So Lisbon is becoming a center of innovation, a center for development of new mobility solutions at an international level. We have a strong open data policy that gives access to the city, and we have more and more data sets going in this portal that enables anyone to develop products. And finally, and maybe the most important things, what we really need, it's people and interesting people in the city of Lisbon. And this is why what's happening in the city of Lisbon in the next years with the phenomenon of the Web Summit, that it's staying here for the next 10 years, is the decision of companies like Volkswagen, Uber, Daimler, BMW, strong international companies that are putting here their development centers to be part of this ecosystem, to be part of this thing that is happening in the city of Lisbon, puts us in a special spot, sweet spot, to actually create a new mobility of the future in the city of Lisbon. And so, thank you all.
Thank you so much. I think we couldn't start the morning in a better way. Not sure if anyone has any questions, or we move to the next speaker. Okay, exactly. Thank you so much again. Super interesting. Now I will call to the stage Martin. Martin leads our automotive and transportation practice across EMEA. Thank you so much also for being with us here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pedro. And thank you, Miguel. I think it was... Was this without some fancy music, right? Thank you also to Miguel. I think it was really inspirational to hear about the exciting journey you're on here in Lisbon. My name is Martin Cadell. I'm coordinating and leading our automotive and transportation practice in Europe, or EMEA. And of course, we say automotive and transportation, but really what's about is to working across now sectors to enable the future of mobility. I'm really happy for you having me here in Lisbon. It's a very beautiful city, I must admit. It's the first time I'm here. And being a Swede, where we have winter right now, it's just amazing to see the weather. So I hope that we can find a reason, we can talk afterwards, for you to invite me back here again to Lisbon, especially from November to March or so. Okay? So I'm going to talk about the future of mobility, and also a bit about how to unlock the future value of mobility. Because I think if we just look back for a second, I think we all know how important transportation and that sector has been to development of our countries, our cities, and the world economy. And also but at the same time, you can also see that a lot of these modes of transportation looks the same now as they look 100 years ago, more or less. And we're coming out to a situation, I think we all agree on that a number of mega trends drive towards a change in this. We see as Miguel talked about, the situation in cities, the pollution. We see the urbanization where more and more people are moving into the cities. And we also see as opportunities the technology development enabling a lot of new ways of actually transport and create a foundation for mobility for the future. So I think what we're going to hear today, and I think all of us here in the room have some visions, some ideas of what that future may bring and what it could look like. And what is really exciting now is that I think we are in a stage where it's really, really interesting, because we see across all the different sectors being involved in this mobility ecosystem. We see a lot of experimenting, we see a lot of pilots, we see a lot of scaling also in some areas. But at the same time, no one really knows what the end game look like. So it's really an exciting journey to explore the unknown future. So if we think about the video that was shown here in the beginning, and that video was actually created based on interviews with different stakeholders in this ecosystem to sort of try to look at what could the future look like, what are the different aspects of this. For those of you who were really awake this morning, I think you may have noticed that there were a couple of common features, common themes across those different scenarios that were being presented. It was about shared, in the sharing economy, how we share assets, how we share our assets with others in different ways. It was electric, or using other sustainable, environmentally friendly modes, powertrains. It was connected, and not only connected me to my car, or the car being connected, or the vehicle being connected. It's also about vehicle to vehicle being connected, vehicle being connected into the transportation system, to parking, as Miguel mentioned, into traffic systems, etc. It was about autonomous vehicles, whatever kind of mode of transportation it may be. It was seamless, so how I transport myself from point A to B in a seamless way. We talked about the regulated city. I think Miguel mentioned that also before, how to drive the regulation, to drive the right incentive and the right development in a city as well. But it's also about you as a customer or you as a user. How could these services, these new business models actually be personalized for you? Because we're all different, we have different preferences. And how can it create an experience that is actually good, almost all the time? And we know that all of this will not happen by itself, and it will be enabled by data and technology. So what you saw in this, which we see experiments already now happening, was around one platform, combining multimodal transportation. It was about one single set of payments, one single payment platform, but also about how to optimize this journey, even in real time, for the customer and his or her preferences. So really exciting. And I think if we then look ahead now, what will actually drive this development going forward from where we stand today and actually helping us to realize this exciting vision. There are a number of different forces. One is the customer, because the customer are changing. I think we all know that the new generations have totally different needs, totally different preferences and behaviors compared with many of us in the room. And I think when I graduated 20 years ago, my first goal was to buy a car. I did that 4 months after I graduated. Now we recruit quite a lot of people to EY directly from universities. And nobody wants to buy a car anymore. It's not even on the top 5 list, and maybe not, they don't want to. They have preferences for, they don't have the preference for owning these assets. So something quite different. And that will drive a lot of change, of course. And not only the new generation, also us, who have new needs and open up for new opportunities as well. It's the cities. I think Miguel's presentation here gave a very clear view how important role the city will play in orchestrating the realization of the future of mobility. We will talk more about that later. And then, of course, the investors. I think currently there is a view that mobility will be a very important part of the future. And therefore, investors of different kinds are pouring in money into this industry, into the different pilots, into the startups, etc. And currently, actually, that is one of the drivers for realizing this change. And then, of course, technology and data is enabling all of this change as well. So zooming into the cities for a second, and I think I can't say anything that wouldn't repeat what Miguel's presentation before, because I think it was very good. But I think the cities have a complex situation today, because they all realize what they need to do, and the need to reduce pollution, the need to reduce number of vehicles in a city, etc., etc. At the same time, unfortunately, for many cities, it's going in the wrong direction. Number of vehicles are increasing, pollution is increasing, etc. So there is exactly as Miguel pointed out, there is a call to act upon this now. And the good thing is that there are a number of cities in the world that are doing that. We see a number of cities who are taking on the leader hat and really doing things. I think for some cities, this is a little bit of a dilemma, because we know that sort of a paradox, actually, because if you look at some cities are used to drive a lot, development very much through regulation, which is a good thing, and there need to be clear regulations on the boundaries and drive the right behavior incentives and so on. But for some cities, this regulation have and will to continue to hinder innovation, hinder open innovation across the ecosystem. On the other side, we see also cities who have let a number of players run wild and do their own thing to optimize their business model, to optimize their profit. And we also do know that that will not optimize the whole setup in a city. There is a combination. And the city, we believe, and exactly as Miguel pointed out before, will play a critical role in orchestrating this. In addition, a lot of the current infrastructure will also need to change to enable this future mobility. The second force are the customers. I think, again, as mentioned, the new generation have new demands. Some of them are now born with basically iPhone in their hands. You can just imagine these guys, like I have 2 sons, they are 8 and 10. They don't know anything about anything else than iPhone, for example. They are born with this, and they have different view on life, different ways of handling things and preferences. So how would you optimize their mobility for the future? We see the change from wanting to own a car to actually being able to buy a service instead and transport yourself in a new way. So I think customers will drive a change, not alone, but there will be one important stakeholder in this development as well for the future. The third thing, especially I would say now, is the investors. If you look at the ecosystem of different investors of today, you see that tech companies, and I think you all know that tech companies are investing into mobility. They want to have their role and find their role in the developing ecosystem, as they know that this would be a large value pool in the future. You see the automotive companies starting to realize that the way we've done business for the last 100 years is not viable in the future. We need to change. And we need to start investing into new startups, into new companies, and new capabilities to enable that. But actually, because we do a lot of analysis of the flow of investments globally in different areas, and when you look into mobility, you see that the majority, as of today, are actually coming from private equity and venture cap. And why is that? Well, first of all, they see that this will be a very valuable area in the future. And they have also a little bit different way of calculating things. They don't need to have the return on investment and show profit first year. They have a different view on this. While if you compare us, as I do a lot of work, for example, with different OEMs around in Europe and globally, the challenge for them is really to go to their top management or board and say that, well, we need to invest a number of billion of dollars here or into this startup or into this new venture or whatever it may be. It may generate revenues in 10 years' time. It may not. We don't know, but we need to start experimenting. It's really difficult. I think for those of you who come from OEMs, have probably noticed, although we also see a lot of good things. I think some of the OEMs have really woken up now the last couple of years and are investing into new ventures and new exciting things for the future. So a lot of the things we are talking about here today are what you could call Mobility 1.0. It's really mostly about single mode enabled solutions. And it could be ride hailing, ride sharing, car sharing, etc. But at the same time, we see a lot of experiments already, and some of them are starting to scale as well. So we believe that what we could call then Mobility 2.0 is just around the corner, where we see the more full development of multimodal integration. We see these full mobility ecosystems being formed, as Miguel talked about here for Lisbon as well, with integrated business models as well. And now it's starting to become really interesting, I think. And as a user or customer, then it becomes really exciting, because then we start to solve some of the issues and problems we see today. And with the city orchestrating a lot of this, we can also start working on the mix of different modes of transportation in a smart way, and thereby realizing reduce pollution and also when it comes to number of vehicles on the street. Then talking about the journey thereafter, what we could call Mobility 3.0, when we actually see the full implementation in one way or another when it comes to autonomous. Then it becomes really, really interesting, because then there are new business models being enabled. We can use vehicles of different kinds in a totally new way. There are experiments not only on ground, but in the air. Some of you probably have seen that. I think that's really exciting. I heard Boeing talk about that last year. Really exciting how they are now testing. From just a couple of years, they are testing in some cities in Europe autonomous vehicles in the air, with actually being able to land and actually being able to go on the ground as well. So there's a lot of things developing here. We don't know exactly what this would look like today, but there are a lot of experiments all over the place. And it's not only with cars, it's with buses, it's with trucks, and other different modes of transportation. So then it starting to become really, really, really interesting. However, as I think briefly mentioned before, I think there is one big challenge here for the traditional players, because we all know that this will happen in one way or another. We don't know exactly how it is going to look like. But again, in order to start moving on this journey, to find our role in the value chain and what would be our business model of the future, we need to start testing, we need to start experimenting on this. And if we then look at the traditional players, like OEMs, but also in the financial sector, energy sector, etc., there is a dilemma and a challenge to actually overcome in terms of how should we prioritize our investment portfolio going forward. We have a long and very successful heritage from being one of a large player in a global market for the last 100 years. And we see that bringing food to the table the next coming 5 to 10 years will still be the current business model, more or less. So what does that mean? Why should we actually invest X number of money into disruptive and new technologies, new business models, even into adjacent, testing out new services, etc.? And I know from a fact, when I work with companies, that it is a challenge, because a lot of the top management are driven by a number of volumes, trucks, cars, buses, whatever. And although there are a lot of exciting experiments, but not to the extent that it perhaps should be. So this is a dilemma for the traditional players, and also an advantage for some of the new players here as well. And again, mention that not being too general, because at the same time we see a lot of exciting things happening. And I think we have someone from Daimler who will speak later. I think it's an exciting and bold way of now creating future mobility division for Daimler and all of what that means, for example. So if you think about this from a value pool perspective, so if we agree on that, well, our role in the future value chain will look different, and our role in that will probably be somewhat different for the future. This is a sort of a framework we are using to work with different clients on. And I think it's quite a good way to structure your thoughts around it. Where is really the value pools and the field of place where we see our future businesses? On this side, different modes of transportation, and on this side, the different role in the value chain. So we see a lot of movements already today. We see, for example, a lot of OEMs moving from selling cars to subscriptions to car sharing. We see a lot of investment in autonomous. As an example, I read or actually heard the CEO for Volvo Cars here a couple of months ago saying that 2025, 50% of our volumes comes from subscription models and new business models. 50%. It's only 6 years down the road, right? We see a number of different players testing out the different roles in the value chain as well. So if you think about this now, what does this mean, and what do we need to do here going forward in order to continue and perhaps in many cases also accelerate in this journey? One thing that we see is very, very critical. We do really like and enjoy all the different pilots, the different experiments that is going on at the moment. What we think is important going forward is also, from the beginning in these experiments and testings, also think about the scalability. Many times these good ideas fail because it's not scalable enough. So that will be one critical part for the future. And that race is ongoing. Then we all know that data will be the foundation for many of these new business models. And the way to integrate data, but also creating new revenue streams. Because we see already now that the data being generated in a city, I think, Miguel, you talked about this topic as well, in a city or by a vehicle or and so on, will also create values for different parties. And for many players, it will also be new revenue streams. One big battleship that will happen, and is very much happening right now, is the ownership of the customer. Who will actually own the customer in the end? Will an OEM just become a producer of hardware and sell it to someone who is integrated with the customer interface? Or will the OEMs actually be the ones driving the customer and the customer connection? Will it be other players, tech players, startups, or different financial services companies? This will be an area where both is important for a company in itself to consider what role to play, but also we will see quite a tough competition when it comes to the ownership of the customer. And in last, don't forget that as we become more connected, as we enable autonomous and new technologies, creating a trust-based solution and make sure that to manage risk and the cybersecurity in this will become very important as well. With having that said, I think last word is just for cities. Don't forget that to work with as Miguel, I think, very well pointed out, work as an orchestrator, work together with companies to enable and drive the future of mobility. And private companies, make sure that you see city as a customer, to actually cooperate and partner up with them to actually drive the development together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. If you all don't mind, the organization asked me, because of time, if we wrap up all the questions and discussion to the coffee break to keep moving. So I would call to the stage Alexandre Vaz, Managing Director of Mercedes-Benz Digital Center in Lisbon, precisely one of the best examples of the new innovation that we aim to bring to Lisbon and to Portugal.
Digital disruption in mobility. So it's a challenge team, actually, and I start thinking how to approach it. Actually, I'm the managing director of Mercedes-Benz IO Portugal. It's a company in the Daimler world that develops all digital platforms worldwide for marketing and sales for cars. And the first thing I would like to actually explain what is disruption, because it's quite different from innovation. Innovation is doing the same things better. Disruption is something different. It's making things that make the old things obsolete. And to explain that, I actually attended a conference a few months ago, and the example they showed was so good that I decided to bring it. And if you were there, sorry, you need to wait a couple of minutes because you already know this example. But if you want to think, well, how does the disruption of the fridge benefit an auto manufacturer? 5 centuries ago, the spice industry was very, very valuable worldwide. People that actually control this industry were making a lot of money because people believe that these spices actually preserved food. We know it's not true, but at the time people believed it. So they were willing to pay for it because they knew that they could keep their food longer than having just fresh food. But then a guy in Boston, in Massachusetts, invented something called the isolated warehouse. And the isolated warehouse allowed him to go in the winter, take ice out of the lakes, keep it, and start selling it through the summer, and start shipping it. So the spice industry got disrupted in a way from a completely different industry, and even the ships that were being used to ship the spices were not the same that were used to ship the ice. So the industry never saw it coming. But this guy didn't live for that long, because a couple of decades later, somebody invented the ice machine. Again, a person from a completely different industry. And the only answer they've got was saying, oh, don't buy fake ice because our natural ice is much better. And again, why would you ship ice from the US to Europe, to India, if you actually could produce it locally? And again, even the ships that were used to send the machines were different. The industry got disrupted from somebody that was not in the industry itself. And then somebody invented the fridge. And then, we all know that the fridge is here. and we all use it, and we don't need to have ice machines actually at home because we can have the fridge. So the big question is, what will disrupt the fridge? There's two things that could actually disrupt the fridge. The first thing, you probably all saw it in the news, is this, drone delivery. In a city like Lisbon, if you have 2 drone towers, you could deliver anything in less than 2 minutes. So if you need a yogurt, you just go buy it and it will be delivered to your house in 2 minutes. But maybe this sounds 10, 20 years, it's not really ready. But this is ready, and this is actually being used in many cities already worldwide. Amazon Fresh delivers anything in less than 1 hour. So what they've got is AI going around the city, and they know what you're going to buy before you actually buy. So if you want to buy your stuff, they're going to deliver to you in your house in less than 1 hour. So it's starting in London, in New York, in some big cities, but eventually we'll go to every city in the world. And if you actually can have anything in less than 1 hour, why do you need a fridge? And for us, Mercedes, for instance, this is actually big news. And we are just starting, and at the end of last year, Amazon acquired 20,000 vans in the US just for these services. So actually, the disruption of the fridge could be a good news for the auto industry, because you are actually able to sell much more vans. But let me talk about mobility disruption 2.0. If you think about mobility, it started with people moving from A to B using horses. Then there was a disruption because the train got invented. And it's a much more safe and secure way actually to transport people. And then in 1879, actually Mercedes Carl Benz invented the first car. And actually this created a new way to think about mobility. It's your personal mobility, much more reliable than using a horse. But if you really think about it, what happened since that time to nowadays, there was no disruption. There was a lot of innovation, but it's still the same concept. There was no disruption. Until, you know this, that's what we were talking about today, the Mobility 2.0 happened. And this is the answer from the industry, this is the answer from Mercedes at this stage that we are showing is case. So you have connected cars, either to the internet or talking to each other. You have autonomous cars, you have shared mobility and services, and you have electric cars. And that's that Daimler, maybe you don't know, actually has pretty much all the assets you need to actually to be a successful player. We have Mercedes, we have Smart, the only probably city brand in the world. We have Mitsubishi Fuso Freightliner for trucks. We have AMG, we have EQ, it's the new electric brand that you will see it in the end of this year. We will have a lot of new electric cars. We have Mercedes Me to control the ecosystems within the cars. Moval, the mobility platform. We have Car2Go, we have MyTaxi. We have pretty much everything. So we could potentially provide all these services together. But since last week, at least now it's public news, completely public news, we did something a little bit more, probably nobody was expecting, and we actually are merging with BMW for all mobility services. So this slide is already outdated because now there's new names for it, but we are putting together Car2Go and Drive now, Moval, Reach now, MyTaxi, Clever Taxi. So it's so important for auto manufacturer, this new world, and as you were saying, actually we are not sleeping, that we are investing a lot of money into making sure that we are the premium mobility provider. And that's, I think, is an important distinction. I think both Mercedes and BMW see themselves as premium. So the mobility we want to provide is the premium mobility. But I also want to actually to leave you something a little bit different, and maybe different from what Martin said in the previous presentation. And that is mobility disruption 3.0. I see it in a little different way. In the same way you see the way the fridge had an evolution, for me, mobility disruption 3.0 will not come from our industry. It will be coming from another industry. And I just want to show you two options, and I want to make you think if you think this will happen. The first one is something that we as auto manufacturers need to be careful. The first one is 3D printing, and let's call it IKEA type of approach. If I have a car that is like autonomous, I know it will not drive more than 50 kilometers in the city, 120 in the highway. I know it is completely controlled. Do I really need that special engine? Do I really need those things that I want to have in a car? Why don't I build it myself? Or why don't I go to IKEA, just buy this part, put it together, and I have my own car. And then actually I can put it in the platform that's already there, that is public, and I can put it, and I can actually rent it out. So this is something that can happen, and that as auto manufacturers we need to, to understand if this will be a trend or not. But much more important than that, and that's the one that I think it's around the corner, and we never discuss when we discuss mobility, is something that Miguel said. Mobility is about going from A to B. But my question is, do you really need to go to B? Why don't you stay in A? Then you think about mobility in a completely different way. And actually, there's a technology that is, in a couple of years, pretty much, I think all of us will start using it and will make us think about when we want to move and why we want to move. And this is VR. There's two huge companies investing on this. Microsoft and Facebook are putting hundreds of millions and will change the world. I have no doubt about that. It will change the way you work. Why would I need to move around if I can actually work from home and think that I'm in the office? The way I learn, because if you put some glasses and if you have tried, you'll see it's really, really good. You can learn and actually see it as you are in there. As you travel, if I want to see the Mona Lisa, I don't have 200 people in front of me. I can actually see it, take it from all types of, turn it around. VR will change mobility. It will not kill it, but will make you think in a different way. And it will impact real estate because people will start, actually, maybe I can live at the beach. Why am I living in the city center? So this is something that as a mobility providers, that you should be really, really taking into account. And that's it from my side.
Alexander, super inspiring. And again, I will keep the request for discussion and questions and comments, etc. at coffee break. And precisely before we have our break in the morning, I will call to the stage João Pernes, head of product Mobilidade, giving the startup flavor to the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, João.
Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to change to Portuguese, just to be more focused on the message. I want to pass, and the players, I want to also like it, to pass the message. Sorry, Martin, about that, but I can talk with you later, of course. So, falar bocadinho sobre a evolução da mobilidade partilhada. Uma das coisas mais importantes para a Mobilidade e como Head of Product é entender o que é que o cliente e as necessidades do mercado. E uma das coisas também bastante desafiantes é participar nela. Olhando um bocadinho para o que foi a evolução e para o que é a evolução a nível de mobilidade partilhada, no início da época, tivemos essencialmente o que nós, na Mobilidade, chamamos os entusiastas. Aquelas pessoas aqueles operadores, local operators, que trabalhavam para comunidades locais, onde queriam-nos oferecer uma alternativa à mobilidade que existia. Eram essencialmente carros, bicicletas, vans, sempre numa ótica de uma utilização alternativa semanal. Com os dias de hoje, ou seja, a partir dos anos 2000, começaram a entrar operadores empresariais focados na mobilidade e, essencialmente, conseguir encurtar a distância entre o ponto A e o ponto B e focados em cidades grandes, como Berlim, Milão, Lisboa, e começaram essencialmente a partilhar não só carros, mas também bicicletas, mas scooters, kick scooters, tudo o que pudesse ser partilhado. Isto também fez com que passássemos de 1000 assets, ou carros, ou bicicletas, de utilização para quase, hoje em dia, 200.000 formas de partilha e passar para milhões e milhões de utilizações anuais. A pergunta é, o que é que vai acontecer a seguir? E o que é que vamos esperar e qual vai ser a nova forma de adoção a nível dos próximos anos? A pergunta que se faz é, a partir de 2020, e já está aí, rapidamente, o que é que nós vamos olhar? A nível de visão da Mobiago, o que nós achamos é que vão começar a aparecer operadores virtuais, operadores esses que vão olhar a mobilidade como forma de poder integrar os seus serviços e fazer parte deles. Com os possíveis carros de partilha, também vai permitir também a que haja uma disseminação a nível dos pontos de partilha, não só dentro das cidades, mas também fora das cidades. O que é que são shareable cars? Hoje em dia, os carros partilhados são cerca de 200, 300 mil carros. Vai crescer até aos 600 mil nos próximos 5 anos, mas os possíveis carros a serem partilhados podem chegar até aos 45 milhões, considerando carros parqueados de rent-a-car, corporate fleets, dealerships, carros que hoje em dia têm um uso exclusivo próprio, e a ideia é eles possíveis serem partilhados também dentro de um ecossistema. Tal como o Martin disse, o transporte é a segunda forma, o segundo custo das famílias, representa a cada 100 euros 17 euros de custo, bem mais ainda acima do que a alimentação. Isto faz com que olhemos para o tamanho do mercado. Hoje em dia, o tamanho do mercado é cerca de 600 bilhões. Em 2025, pensa-se que o mercado de partilha é cerca de 600 bilhões, mas em 5 anos, ou seja, 2030, e foi um patamar que já se falou aqui, pensa-se que este valor duplique. Aos números de hoje, representa cerca de 17 vezes mais do que o mercado em nível de crescimento. O que é que nós achamos que vai acontecer? Achamos que comecem a aparecer o que nós chamamos de operadores virtuais, operadores que têm grandes carteiras de clientes, que tenham uma grande proximidade e uma grande relação com estes, já têm fidelização, já têm uma grande força de marca e que permitam ter um valor de aquisição de clientes muito baixo. Faz com que também eles consigam e comecem a participar exatamente no que nós chamamos do serviço de mobilidade e tornar-se assim uns Virtual Mobility Operators, onde basicamente vão permitir aumentar o seu share of wallet, top line revenue, e também aumentar a sua retenção de clientes. Ao mesmo tempo, com toda a experiência das empresas de leasing, rent-a-car, car sharing operators, dealerships, e com a sua experiência e o seu músculo, vão também suportar este crescimento e dar suporte também a estas novas formas de prestar serviço de mobilidade. Hoje em dia, a adoção ou a mobilidade partilhada é normalmente focada e vertical entre a base do utilizador através de uma app e acesso a uma frota. O que nós consideramos é que isto vai passar a acontecer a uma rede. Isto é, os operadores de mobilidade continuam a existir. No entanto, as empresas como telcos, bancos, empresas de seguros, vão começar a entrar e a partilhar as suas bases de cliente e assim poder também aumentar o número de utilizações e a rentabilidade dos carros dos próprios operadores já existentes de mobilidade partilhada. Hoje em dia a Mobiag já tem casos de uso no mercado. Começámos a trabalhar há uns anos, há 1 ou 2 anos, com um banco da Polónia. A ideia do Banco da Polónia é exatamente poder partilhar com a sua carteira de 5 milhões de clientes a mobilidade nas cidades, com o objetivo exatamente de agregar isto aos seus serviços financeiros e usando exatamente os operadores locais de car sharing que existem no país. Também na Arábia Saudita nós estamos a trabalhar com uma telco que quer incorporar e está a incorporar os serviços de mobilidade do país, como serviço de rent-a-car, serviço de car sharing, e usando também os carros parqueados que estão atualmente parados para utilizar também a nível de utilização corporate. Um dos clientes também nós trabalhamos desde 2017 é uma empresa de energia na Turquia. Ela, exatamente por uma questão de não existir tecnologia na altura e preparada para as suas necessidades, ela começou exatamente por criar a sua frota de operação de car sharing numa ótica de conseguir preparar o futuro. Hoje em dia, e ainda durante este ano, vai utilizar exatamente esta frota de carros que tem para partilhar com os seus clientes privados como um serviço inovador e diferenciado e disruptivo. O que é que nós conseguimos hoje em dia fornecer na Mobiag a nível de ferramentas? Tanto para operadores virtuais, ou seja, conseguimos ter uma plataforma que permite a gestão de cliente, onboarding, gestão de conta de cliente, billing, pagamentos, pricing e subscrições. Subscrições, de facto, é uma das ferramentas que são mais apetecíveis porque faz com que mais e mais pessoas fiquem fidelizadas ao serviço. Para operadores de frota, toda a parte de fleet management, gestão de acesso exatamente ao carro, bicicleta, moto, kick scooters e toda a parte de gestão de hardware. Com isto, cria-se exatamente uma rede. A rede de operadores, sejam eles empresas de grande base de clientes, sejam empresas de prestação de serviços de frota, mas conseguimos criar o que nós chamamos e que vocês conhecem como roaming das telecomunicações. Há uma partilha de assets, uma partilha de clientes, vivendo numa única base, utilizando uma única account, mas podendo aceder a todos os pontos de mobilidade, permitindo assim nós conseguirmos fazer uma boa consolidação entre pontos e entre operadores. Obrigado pelo convite, obrigado por estar aqui. Acho que consegui poupar tempo e estamos preparados para o coffee break. Foi um prazer.
Muito obrigado, João. Thank you for the sharing as well. So yeah, if you agree, let's make a brief coffee break. Kindly ask you to be back in the room 11:30. Also conscious of your busy agendas to try to finish at 1 p.m. sharp. Thank you. Welcome back to the second half of this morning. Hope you are enjoying it. I think we have an equally great second half of the morning. So with no further delay, I would call to the stage Afonso Sousa, Head of ITS, Integrated Transport Systems at Siemens Mobility Hub.
Good morning, everyone. I will switch back to English. Despite the title being in Portuguese, all the slides are in English, so I will keep the English. The subject I bring to you, it's the path to autonomous driving. Perhaps I'm not the best guy on the room to talk about it. We had just the view from Mercedes-Benz, which should be even more interesting. Nevertheless, I'm focusing my presentation on the infrastructure side, okay? And that's exactly where Siemens normally positions itself, not on the vehicle itself, but on the infrastructure. So what I will talk a little bit briefly about it is what we need to do to adapt our infrastructure for receiving autonomous vehicles, which are, in fact, nowadays a reality. You for sure have seen many of footages of autonomous cars driving, typically in test tracks, okay? So I will start with the video. It should play. This short video actually is from a car or a prototype that goes back already to 2017. Okay, so it was actually a working prototype, and we managed to work with Greenspeed on the infrastructure side. Okay, and many of those use cases that you see there were already discussed today. But you see the presence of the shared mobility, but also the intermodal and switching in between different modes, all integrated and controlled, and all the information on the smartphone. And continuous presence and innovation, it's on Siemens ADN, okay? So I've gathered here just three examples. So the first alarm bell system applied to railways, okay? Which is now moving, has already moved to driverless metro operations. Okay, so this is many years distance. Then the second one, the first electric railway. Once again, Siemens innovation. And now we see Velaro, which is one of the world's most efficient high-speed platforms, which is now a lot on the news regarding the possible or the denied merging with the French Alstom. It was one of the systems that had some controversy around it. And then, last but not least, the first traffic light that was installed in Europe, in Potsdamer Platz in Berlin. It's actually still there. If you go there, there's more like a monument to it. And now we can do this and control our traffic lights with the tip of our hands. And once again, 3 areas where Siemens was and still is more than 100 years ago. So, but now, and this was also mentioned here, when we look at the car industry during the last 100 years, there were no major changes, and now we are looking into a major or a possible disruptive change into the car industry, which is autonomous vehicles. Okay, so you've seen a prototype, you've seen Tesla cars, you've seen for sure several videos, and it's a reality. Autonomous vehicles are here, but the fact is that our infrastructure, so our roads, and also even our mentalities are not yet ready to receive these autonomous cars from night to day. And for this, we are sure we have portfolio to answer these questions. And just to give you more or less an overview and for you to see where Siemens is positioned in this area, we've built this pyramid, okay, that is basically, it can be summarized on the top part as the infrastructure equipment, there's traffic lights, you can see also CCTV cameras, ANPR cameras, variable message signs, and then you move to a middle layer on the pyramid. You see all the software that allows you to control and monitor infrastructure, and on the top of the pyramid, you see, let's say, full-blown software that can be seen as mobility integrated platforms and to give answers and tools, the right tools to cities or mobility operators to act on their infrastructure. Interoperability between infrastructure, it will be key for receiving this type of mobility systems. So here are some examples. So you've seen on the past years, and particularly in Portugal, huge investments in terms of infrastructures, let's say concrete, okay, and buildings and roads and highways. But now it's the time to actually optimize this infrastructure and integrate it. Typically, interoperability, it's something that is not yet present, and we see it every day. So different manufacturers, they do not speak with each other. But if you want to look at connected mobility, in particular CITS, cooperative ITS systems, this is key for the success in the future. So no matter who the manufacturer is, I should be able to directly communicate with him. Some references in Portugal and what we've been doing here. So despite this is a centenary business unit, in Portugal we are quite recent, but still we've been doing service for traffic management systems in both Lisbon and Porto. Also some interesting integrated mobility projects in the south of Portugal, in Algarve. Then more recently, it was mentioned here, we are also linked to the Gira project, so the bike sharing system in Lisbon, where we perform the installation, operation, and maintenance, which can be quite complex, operating such a large bike sharing system. And then service for tunnels and interurban equipments. Here are some examples. So these are, of course, Siemens equipment that are typically on the side of your infrastructure. So traffic controllers, traffic lights, then all kinds of sensors from magnetic to radars, and also for tolling and for giving priority to public transport or to bus or to fire brigades. And then here on this corner here, this is what I wanted to focus the presentation, is what we call Sea Traffic ESCO solution. This is a roadside unit. It's actually a unit you've seen on the video that it's installed on the side of the road, and it allows to communicate with vehicles, both directions. So vehicles can communicate with each other, but they can also communicate with infrastructure, and it's bidirectional. okay? And these units can then be connected to environmental sensors, can be connected to traffic controllers, and can send different types of message to inside the vehicles that can then be displayed to the drivers to then help them make the right decisions with a huge focus on security, okay? So typically the more important use cases are around security and how to increase security on our roads, okay? So we can create the path for autonomous driving. Here are some use cases. I'm not going through all of them, but we separate typically what's the urban playground from what's the interurban playground. So inside of city, in an urban area inside of a city, typically you have, of course, lots of use cases. There are some that I would like to highlight. For example, time to green. This is already a reality where you can have those roadside units connected to a traffic controller, and you can send message to inside of the vehicle on what the speed should the driver drive in order to get green or in order not to stop. Also, of course, considering the limits of the speed. Information about park and ride. So this is also something very interesting. But for all of this, so having all the information centered in one point and having the possibility of creating frameworks and normalization so that all players can communicate with each other, it's key for our road operators or city operators to then be able to manage such an intelligent infrastructure. So interurban playground, once again, so some use cases, so like informing about weather conditions, where you can have it connected with the environmental sensors and directly send messages to inside the car, warning them, for example, that there is water on the road or there is ice on a specific spot. Also informing, for example, if there's an accident, you can then send messages and they can be transmitted either from the infrastructure or from vehicle to vehicle and then to infrastructure to vehicles that are further ahead. So this is basically creating a mesh network with vehicles and infrastructure sending and receiving messages along each other. Wrong way warnings as well. So there are different use cases that are now a reality. And this is something that is on top of the agenda at a European level. Portugal is not, it's not in any case different, okay? So there are projects that I will highlight later on happening in Portugal, okay? But this is something that goes back to 1984 with some important steps, okay? And I have highlighted here one important remark just to also for you to understand how politics is also important in this kind of situation. So back in 2016, the Minister for Transportation in the US said that starting from 2019, all the vehicles that would be sold in the US should be compatible with V2X, so should have an on-board unit capable of communicating. This, of course, led the car industry to react, and several brands started anticipating or announcing when would their models be compatible. If we look nowadays, we are in 2019. This mandate was not yet executed, unfortunately. But nevertheless, you see the top car manufacturers positioning themselves, and we have just more recent news that, for example, Toyota said that starting from 2021, all their vehicles, all their platforms would be equipped with such units. General Motors the same, okay? German car industry also here present, so we've been doing several tests and pilots with these car manufacturers. But this to state that, so these type of decisions and these type of statements, of course, shake the industry, not only on the car manufacturers in this case, but also the infrastructure. So there are several EU initiatives and funded projects happening and going on to make our roads much smarter, and including this type of technology alongside. So this is the case that I was talking to you earlier on. This is the path to autonomous driving, and this is what we have right now. So when we're driving, you know the speed limits, and that's it, and we know what we can see, right? So what we can nowadays do already is give you information about things that are happening in background or that are happening on the infrastructure side, like what's the programming on that traffic light. So I wish when I get there, I could get the green, okay? This type of information is already possible to send to inside of the vehicle and basically help the drivers to decide and what's best for them, okay? With a high focus on security, I would like to state that. So I mentioned in Portugal, this is not an exception. I was also talking here earlier on about one of these projects, C Roads. It's actually happening. So many of our streets will have units such as those that you've seen, the roadside units from Siemens, from other manufacturers. The fact is that they should be interoperable. Okay, they should communicate with each other. Another important thing is that they are cooperative, okay? So they can communicate not only with each other, but also that there is backward compatibility, okay? So if we want to make this useful for everyone and accessible for everyone, we should also look back and see what do we have to do to update the existing vehicles, okay? So backward compatibility is essential. And then last but not least, and it's actually the biggest focus, I mentioned security. So this type of communication flowing in, it's the majority of it around security, and these messages should be authenticated, okay? And not everyone could be able to send messages and make them available. So they need to be checked. Are they okay? Are they reliable? Can I retransmit those messages, okay? So this is key for the success of such projects. And then another project is 5G Mobix. So here it's using a different technology, which is 5G, to also implement similar use cases. I've gathered a few of those here. So learn merging for autonomous vehicles, okay? So this means that the vehicles are communicating with each other, with infrastructure, and then can automatically lane merge without even having to stop, okay? So they can adjust themselves to allow another extra vehicle to get in. Autonomous overtaking, also important, especially in these cases where you have trucks ahead and you cannot see it. Okay, so autonomous overtaking, it's for sure something where we can improve a lot. Critical situations where security is put in case. And then, of course, something also for consumers, okay? 5G will decrease the latency from 40 milliseconds to 1 millisecond, which is huge, and it, of course, potentiates different use cases such as transmitting live video to inside of a bus, or even HD maps in real time being updated to inside of the vehicle. So these use cases will be tested here in Portugal, also in cross-border use cases with Spain, linking Porto to Vigo. So, and this is happening here in Portugal. This is what I would like to show you, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Afonso, for sharing your thoughts with us today, and also a great link with the previous presentations, the digital angle of the OEM and also the city angle as well. I would like now to call Nuno Silva, Head of Director of Innovation and Technology, FASEC, also to share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
All right. Good morning still, and thanks for inviting me. So I'll try to complement what we heard this morning and also following up what Afonso, my colleague from Siemens, exposed as in a technology more centered approach. I'll go on the trends and talking about the future, which is on my title. And the future is quite broad, so I'll have a strong focus on the immediate future, which is 2030. So again, thanks for inviting me. My name is Nuno Silva, and I work for FASEC. FASEC is a Portuguese company, not as old as Siemens, but with 70 respectful years. We operate also on the mobility sector for a long time on the rail and light rail systems, road systems, and more recently, you probably heard about the electric mobility, where we are one of the world leaders on fast and ultra-fast charging stations. Now, we all understand why we're going electric, and I like the acronym on the case that the colleague from Daimler used: connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. I'll focus on the first and the last. And we understand why electric. Electric is more efficient. That's actually how it started, the vehicle. And we want to increase the added value of an efficient transportation method. And hence, we climb up the ladder of efficiency, and we move from fossil fuel ICEs, and internal combustion engines, to fully electric cars. And there are 8 trends that we need to foresee within the next 10 years. 8 trends which I think have been approached already this morning, so I'm not making any mistake. One is the shared mobility. So we are now sharing infrastructure. We are moving away from ownership into a services-oriented. But nevertheless, until 2030, we are still expecting a growth in the vehicle fleet, around 2% per annum. Now, what's going to change is the behavior of customers. And here, we've been also hearing a lot this morning, we do share vehicles, and also this has a consequent, immediate side effect, which is an increased exponential added value services market that is created. But this hype is not completely transversal. So there are regions in the world where this is moving faster than others, and I'll take you through that in a second. The 5th and 6th trend is the regulatory issues. Technology is an enabler, but we need the regulatory environment in place so that we can actually trial and evolve fastly on the comfort curve of adopting these new technologies. And the electrification of transportation is a fact. We understand it as viable, economically viable, especially if we take into consideration the exogenous consequences, so the intake of renewable energies. But this creates new competition. We are creating a new market, a services-oriented market, an added value market, which goes from the commodity of a car. And on this landscape, the mobility landscape is increasing in complexity, and incumbent entities will have to learn to cooperate. And we have the perfect example between Daimler and BMW creating a joint venture for services. But there are space for new entrants. Services are quite various, and we saw today a startup showing up here. There are immense startups and companies diversifying their portfolio on the services connected to mobility. So, in a nutshell, what are the figures that we see today in terms of electrification of vehicles? Now, we see the latest I have is the first semester of last year. So let's pick up that for almost 800,000 units of cars were sold on the first semester alone. This basically is led by China. And this is as clear as we can see. And I'll show you a specific graph on this. Europe is providing a very good example, although within Europe it's also not completely transversal. Different state members evolve at different pace. But we see then US in the third place, providing the example. Now, many of the fast-growing markets are actually new countries, and countries which are very specific in terms of culture. For example, in this case, the fastest-growing this first semester is Finland, with 150% of intake, of acquisition of new electrical vehicles. As a major ballpark figure for you guys to have on your mind, by the end of 2018, we should be having 5 million cars. So as of today, in the world, that's what we have, which is immensely small. It's 0.4% of the total fleet. So yes, it's scaling up exponentially, still very, very residual numbers. And therefore, there's a huge amount of things happening around the world, both within the market, with mergers and acquisitions, big ones, massive ones. We are now at the period of seeing a lot of acquisitions. Even this week, Total had an acquisition in Portugal from a renewable generation company. So Intel bought for 15 billion Mobilide. Shell and Total are buying in the EV landscape, providing also energy for feeding in the electric cars. Volkswagen has a hugely ambitious project, especially in the US, called Electrify America. There's Model 3 already on the market, which is supposed to be the most sold electrical car this year. Let's see about that. Also government initiatives, both the UK and China ruling new laws, but we see a lot of initiatives also at the municipality level, where cities actually enforce incentives or penalties for those who use more polluting cars. Now, how has this been evolving? This graph only shows the electrical vehicles, okay? So these are the number in 1,000 units of vehicles on the market. And I split these in two different types. One is plug-in electrics, and other ones are full battery electrics. And we see the difference in the colors. Also, if we look into the landscape per country, such as I've given you an example, these are the figures in terms of market intake. And we see here, again, China has been, for some years now, leading. It's a huge market. They have very positive incentives for those who trade ICE cars to electrical vehicles. And it's providing, and it's causing an impact. It's causing even a higher impact if we look into the electric bus, so electric public transportation. And here we can hardly see the rest of the world. On this graph, the red is China. And this is the amount of e-bus that we have in the world. So there are 382,000, and there are only 4,000 in the rest of the world, according to these statistics, of course. But this gives a ballpark figure of what is happening. So we see a lot of potential in the public transportation to go electric. And the consequences of that can be shown already in China. And that's a fraction of the fleet of buses in China. But the conversion to electric already can be seen here, saving or displacing the diesel demand. So a very straightforward and direct impact in displacing oil consumption. Now, if we go and have a quick look into the news, either from December last year, January or February, I was able to extract a few images and snapshots for this specific conference. One is that Portugal has been prepared for some times. I would say almost a decade that Portugal took the initiative to prepare. So the problem of the chicken and the egg is no problem anymore. Now, we do have quite a few charging spots. I've marked only the fast charging ones because those are the ones that allow us to navigate the country. If we add the normal charging, we'll have a lot more. The market tells us that it's supposed to boom this year. The incentives from government have been reshaped and refined, the expectation is quite big. Also because there's a new regulation enforced last year. So yeah, you're going to pay for it, but it's still hugely, incomparably economic. What we also see is companies in Portugal going down this path. So Nissan is setting up their own network. EDP is actually doing the same with a focus on private charging and company fleet charging. And we see manufacturers giving us the option of having so many models coming on the market this year. At least there were a few brands named here with more than 20 new models. Now, from the last 7 years, our performance has not been ideally, so this is not really a positive news. It's written such as that, but it's not. It means that we have been investing quite residually on electric cars. Last year it changed, and this year is supposed to change a lot. However, we still complain about not having enough places to charge our vehicles. So, how to narrow this down? The forecast for the years to come are growing. The number of models available is growing. The brands, all the OEM car manufacturers, this is the number of new models up to 2025. So we see we'll have a lot of options. All of them have actually targets. They've set themselves their own targets. And some of them are ambitious, but also kind of realistic. We see some numbers. I've tried to put some numbers in this table from the electrical vehicles outlook in 2018. And we see already good ecosystems of cars. So they are not spread geographically. What I mean by this segmentation is by type of charging. Those who can charge faster are here on the top. And we expect, for example, this year, the Porsche, which is the fastest charging car on the market. Now, when we talk about electrical vehicles, we'll always ask ourselves about batteries. Batteries are what's in the car, what absorbs electrons and makes us move from A to B. And battery itself, it's quite a significant fraction of the cost of an electrical vehicle. And therefore, we see the annual demand for batteries to be rising exponentially as well. There are new segments of the market, not only connected to mobility, but connected to grid and very big scale storage, to improve the value of renewables, to increase the flexibility of electric systems, or to provide microgrids. So we see that the battery manufacturers are making a move, are investing quite a lot because the market is booming, the demand is booming. Car companies actually want this cost to reduce. They want to buy a lot of batteries for the lowest possible cost. So they are trying to either invest themselves, and we see some strategies like that, or to make long-term plans and cooperations with the battery manufacturers. What we see is that the technological trend, takes us to a very significant reduction of the cost of the energy provided by batteries. So our electrical vehicles will be cheaper. That's what we read here. If we look what happened until last year, and we focus this, we see a huge reduction in 7 years actually, from a cost of $1,000 US per kilowatt hour per energy down to 200. And we estimate this value is actually on the high end. And now, how do we fill in the batteries? How do we put energy and electrons inside the batteries? So we said that Portugal is quite well equipped. There are countries which are doing developing their national infrastructure. We see quite big initiatives both on the US and also in Europe. Transversal cross-border strategies from several companies, most of them actually driven by car manufacturers. What we see here is the composition of the market as of today. So there is a huge majority of private chargers, those we use inside our houses, domestic or company chargers. Now, what we see also is for the electric mobility, for the true decarbonization of transportation, what we need is to speed this up. And if we look at the dots are actually the growth rate of each of these types of infrastructure. We see the growth rate of fast charging, public fast chargers, to be showing a 300% increase in 2016 alone. So this is the strategy and the correct strategy, and I'll explain you exactly why. But before that, so we have the electric car stock by market. We have decomposed that so that you understand how to provide electricity to cars through what types of infrastructure. This is slow charge, this is fast charge, and the green is what country? You know that, China. So electric cars will clearly outnumber the available infrastructure. We do not need one-to-one, of course not, but we are on a completely different ratio from what we are used to fossil fuels for our combustion engine cars. So we ought to increase, and the good numbers say 1-to-8, 1-to-6 on the public charging stations would be ideal. Now, why is it so important to provide fast charging? Of course, for range anxiety, for us to be able to move from A to B and to consider quite different, quite big distances, but also for one very simple reason, is that if we do provide AC charging, then we have an onboard charger, which is a new component that goes into the car. If we do provide DC charging, the charger is itself in the charging station. So we reduce the number of components on the car, which is by a factor of scale obvious. So this reduces the infrastructure investment. Now the problem here, it's not a problem, it's a challenge, is the lack of standardization. As we developed this market, we were not able to coordinate among ourselves, which resulted in car manufacturers in the US, in Europe, and in Asia to be developing different technologies. And here we have the different type of connectors that we have available, and also the different type of standards that we have available. Not a problem, the infrastructure will talk to them all. So technologically, we have solved this. The consequence of the adoption of technology and electrical vehicles is a considerable increase on the electricity demand. Not energy, electricity. Actually, the energy will decrease with the electrification of transport, but the electricity will increase. And here is the graph showing the expected increase up to 2040. Why energy decreases? Well, if we see a normal, regular internal combustion engine vehicle that is supposed to, spend a little, more or less, this sort of range of energy, we add the expansion on the fleet, which is foreseen for the years to come, and then we start subtracting. We subtract what? The efficiency gain in terms of using an electric engine, then the conversion of what we have already on the fleet available in the world, and what we've been talking about this morning. Shared, connected, is actually taking a lot more energy, which will result in almost 30% less in the energy utilization. And this energy can be very well complemented with renewables. Nowadays, we do have electrical vehicles in symbiosis directly with the grid. Well, nowadays, and the future is already now, we are complementing this with two things. One is feeding the electricity for the electric vehicles through renewables. This increases the added value of renewables, but we are also complementing the infrastructure with storage. What storage provides, it's a buffer so that we can reduce the capex in terms of infrastructure, so that our infrastructure today is suitable for our needs of electrical vehicles of tomorrow. And I'll finish this up, hope I'm not getting too late, with an example of these two acronyms. No need to read what's here, but grid for vehicle and vehicle to grid. The previous colleague said vehicle to X. Totally understand that. And of course, that's our perspective as well. So what would a day in the future look like when we all drive electrical vehicles? If we start on a day, 24 hours on a day, and this would be the state of charge of my battery. And we're sleeping, and at night there's wind actually flowing. So I'm at my home and I'm charging my battery. I'm connected. I have an automation system that I have no need to do anything. So the system will automatize my charging and will optimize also or minimize my spending. So I'll wake up and I'll drive to work. And as soon as I get to work, I connect my vehicle. But I connect not to charge, but to discharge, to provide services to the grid and get paid for it. And by lunchtime, I'll start recharging again so that I can come and return home. And I'll recharge on a phased fashion, so that all the grid can be operated and optimized in terms of use of cables and lines of infrastructure. And then as soon as I get home, I wish it was so early in the afternoon, I go cooking and being with the family, but with my car connected. And the car will discharge so that I can actually use the energy of my battery to cook at home, to turn my AC and my microwave and my oven on. And then during the night it will charge once again. If we transpose this with our needs in terms of infrastructure, this is what I'm showing you here. This is the profile, the typical profile in Portugal of consumption. What I'm saying here is that we can optimize the use of the battery of the vehicle in a way that we can optimize the way we use the overall energy, electricity at home. So one thing compensates for the other. And this is what will make our world a lot more sustainable on this energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuno, for your presentation. Super interesting, super inspiring. And now I will join to ask Eduardo Ramos, CEO of A2B, powered by Brisa, to also share your thoughts around the management of infrastructure, management of mobility beyond infrastructure.
Bom dia a todos. In English, to give context to all of this. First of all, thank you to EY. It's a pleasure to be here as an alumni of this firm where I've learned a lot. I will talk today with you about mobility beyond infrastructure management, not forgetting a very important detail, infrastructure management. Okay? We'll talk about mobility, but we continue to be physical elements of the space. Appreciate Nuno's referring from A to B so many times in his speech. It's quite good to listen to our brand in the mobility space. But basically, I would like to start and tease you with some numbers. I had the benefit of listening to the Siemens colleague and now to FSX colleague. I will focus my presentation in two mobility pain points. The first one is time. No better resource, no more valuable resource, time. And if we look at time and the energy we expend and we lose throughout our days, and if we feel that we have congestion in Lisbon or in Oporto, we don't. We really don't. Because outside these boundaries, congestion is really an headache. But just these three examples. First of all, urbanization. Of course, this is a given. Continues to grow. It will continue to grow. And there's nothing we can do about it. Cities will continue to be bigger. We will continue to have issues to address here. But just as a fact, 55% of total population from 46% in 97 now live in cities. It will continue to be so. Now, the figures of the second and third example are more striking. The first, the cost of congestion in Greater New York. So $34 billion wasted, just wasted, because mobility is not efficient, because people and goods do not move in the proper way. But the last one is the one that we usually use in our sales pitch, which is the time that, of course, LA, we picked an example which you all know. It's a complete mess. On average, each LA citizen loses almost a month's work just standing still. Just like that, okay? 102 hours, on average. So imagine how can we improve on that, so there is a huge pain point on this. The second stream of examples is related to something which, sorry, I don't know if it was touched or not today, which is accidents, safety. And if you look at some figures, we can check that 2.9 trillion, so trillion in the US basis, is lost due to accidents, so road accidents. Additionally, 1.25 million people are killed just on road accidents, just. So we're talking about age 15 to 29, depending on the license plates, and also the 8th leading cause globally. And there is a clear mandate from the UN while trying to reduce this. When we talk about mobility, when we talk about flows, we need to understand how do they move in the physical world. And that's what I would like to tease you this morning, to understand what are we thinking about as A2B to address this. A final note on this. Today there is a major problem in managing all these flows, which is distracted driving. You probably have heard about it. Distracted driving has become a pain point which we need to address seriously with advances on voice more than texting. Everyone texts a lot, and the texting while driving is clearly an issue we have to address. Looking at the vision for mobility, and here with the benefit of my main shareholder, Brisa, we understand the vision of mobility in 3 buckets. The first one is obviously mobility for people as Brisa, as infrastructure management of roads. The second one, our big sister Via Verde, that manages all the ecosystem to allow mobility to work properly, okay? Understanding and acknowledging and thanking most of you, I imagine, for being Via Verde customers, having the benefit of using these solutions for the benefit of your time. That's what Via Verde is here for. To enable all this, the technology that is the basis that makes all these things work. Why changing to A2B? Because this was Brisa technology, and we started to grow and sell our solutions also to the classical competitors of Brisa. So usually, Jerónimo Martins does not like so nice names in their systems and vice versa, so it's obvious. So we just changed the brand for this to be more captured. So this is the vision we intake. I will focus now on the technology part of it, addressing the mobility pain points that we have seen before. First of all, a bit on A2B. So basically a growing company, a B2B, 2C company. So we work behind the curtains. Making pitches like this is something that we do in industry forums. We usually don't make pitches like this for open audiences. We let that for our sister Via Verde. But basically growing significantly in the last couple of years. More than double turnover, headcount growing significantly, which for all of you it's a headache now to hire people in this sector, technology, but that's just a point we need to solve. And regarding transactions processing, this is divided mostly, or basically 40 to 50% in the European market and the rest in the US market. So around 15 million transactions processed in our systems last year, and 7.5 million customers processed also. So in their mobility needs, their payment access and payment transactions enter our systems. They have an account, they have a financial clearing situation, and of course their mobility is paid. The footprint, of course, starting in Portugal, but currently in Europe with the major footprint in the USA. When we look at the portfolio, in the portfolio we address divides between three main buckets. The first one is back offices, so move beyond. Everything that allows a plain vanilla transaction of tolling to a GPS transaction on mobility in the Washington state, in the west coast of the USA. So ranging from shared, connected, etc., that Nuno also referred previously. Then Atlas, which tries to address everything which is related to security, to safety of our customers, and the customers of our customers. And in the middle, something that we attribute a lot of importance, which is the link beyond. Why do we call it link beyond? Because it links the physical to the non-physical. The best example we usually give is a Via Verde parking usually has a gantry that has to move, right? And today, the world is full of apps that integrate with apps that integrate with apps. And what about the physical world? It still exists. We still exist, right? It's very important to have solutions to address that, and that is clearly something that we have tried to explain, and fortunately with success, in international markets with the experience we have drawn in the Portuguese market. Focusing now, where do we see beyond? And this, of course, was not a copy, neither from EY, neither from us, but our brand in terms of R&D is beyond, really. So looking beyond, where do we focus now to address these main pain points? First of all, innovation management. We continue to have a very strong network of innovators, of PhDs in Europe and most recently in the US, due to our footprint in the market, which allows us to have a lot of challenges with scientific researchers, and also to solve issues that our clients pose to us. Then in the left-hand side, machine learning, artificial intelligence, trying to understand how can we optimize the functioning of our colleagues, the functioning of our clients to address their own needs. Blockchain, this distributed ledger, we're not talking about Bitcoins here, but blockchain, how can blockchain as a technology can help us process better and more efficiently transactions? We have already pilots with that. Big data, inevitable. In Europe, we have to address GDPR. Obviously, in the US, still, we don't need to do that. We will. That is our belief. It will happen also, the privacy protection in the US, given recent events that we all know. Then something that in Europe is not as used, but in the US it is quite used, which is dynamic pricing. In mobility, pricing is usually something that Uber break through as a value point, and customers, clients are asking us to understand how can they extract more value from their solutions, their own solutions, according to dynamic pricing, and also that has impacts in the way our solutions are built. Communication, radio frequency, a lot was talked about this from the Siemens colleague. V2X, we call it V2X, it could be V to whatever. But basically, how the 5G, the advent of the 5G, understanding what will be the business case within. We haven't understood it yet. I think we all are looking to understand how it will work to make things safe in terms of connections. Real user charging, and this, of course, is using what we have in front of us with communication channels for mobility to be addressed and used in a better way. And focusing for the final section of this presentation, autonomous vehicles and vehicle 2X. The C Roads project that was mentioned before is also a project that we have been involved. And just a bit of a use case. This is a geeky slide, I'm sorry, but just to express how we feel. The first part of it is basically the infrastructure that we need to have in place, and the level of sensoring on roads will be quite relevant more and more, which will allow us to have cars, infrastructure, control centers, and even people connected to us, because we don't lose our smartphones. We usually have our smartphones with us, so we also have a sensor with us all the time. So basically, that's the way it will go, and most likely all the connections we will build upon this. The use cases will be to address better fluidity, so People, goods, cars, scooters, electric scooters, small, big, whatever, they will move in a much more orderly way. Also, platooning, which was referred before, I will not do myself, and traffic jams, also security, animals and persons, speed limits, weather conditions, etc. So we will enter more and more, and the A9 pilot that was performed by us and by other stakeholders of the autonomous vehicles project in CREL last fall addresses exactly this. How will this behave in an automated way? More or less assistant? What will we do? What will be the dangers within? And how can we provide a better solution for all? What is the end game, in our view, with this ecosystem in place and with all the tools that we have to address? 4 buckets, 4 objectives. The first one, fluid. If we don't work in more fluid mobility, we are not doing well our mission, at least from our industry point of view. It doesn't make sense, right? And again, Europe, and Portugal in this case, still has a lot of room to suffer from those mobility points. Let's hope it will not happen. But other parts of the world, namely the US market, which we know better, is clearly something to solve urgently. Carbon zero, you may call it electric. Most likely it will be electric. For us, it's carbon zero, agnostically speaking. Much more safe. We cannot afford to continue to have levels of accidents and levels of casualties as we have. And technology will most likely create those conditions to happen. We have to be smart enough to have the tools in order to avoid that trend to continue. Because that trend will continue, right? Again, going back to distracted driving. Finally, productive. The time we spend on mobility is not productive. And all the stakeholders that we have here are working for this mobility to be more productive, not entering in the car and say, I will lose 30 minutes. I have to use those 30 minutes or 40 minutes for something much more suitable. In the end, coming back to the beginning, what we need to address as A2B is offering much better time. Because, again, what other resource is more valuable than time? I will now ask the Regie to pass a video that captures this vision. Thank you.
John lives here and works here, which means that he has to move across the city to get to work. But life isn't just work. John has more things to get done during the day. Wouldn't it be great if this daily commute could be integrated so John wouldn't have to connect to each point separately? Paying, for example, just one mobility bill? That's where we come in. A2B connects companies to public authorities, providing solutions for mobility payments and operations, ensuring that mobility networks are open to everyone, including tolling, with manual and electronic payments using vehicle beacons or mobile apps. Parking, all the way from accessing the parks to easy payments. Vehicle sharing, whether it is a car trip or a last-mile bike ride. Drive-thrus, from food places to groceries and drugstores. Fueling, with effortless tag payments. Public transport, which means linking trains, ferries, taxis, subways, buses, you name it. Every mobility operator is invited to play its part, along with the organizations that manage the road and city traffic, ensuring that all this flows. This way, traveling and commuting becomes a seamless mobility experience for John and everybody else. Because it's not just about going from A to B, it's about transforming the ride, making it easier, safer, more sustainable and fulfilling. And when John gets to the end, it's more than a B, it's a beyond. A to B. Mobility beyond.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, for your presentation, your thoughts. I think we ended up in great shape the rounds of speakers. And now to finish the morning, we'll have a panel discussion. So I would like for you to welcome me on the panel, António Oliveira Martins, CEO of Lisplan Portugal and also Vice President of the Portuguese Association for Factoring and Renting, Tiago Farias, President of Carris, João Pernes, that already made a presentation in the first half, will also be the third participant, and then it will be moderated by Martin. So welcome you all. The topic of the discussion is mobility platforms and their impact in terms of, as you wish, their impact in terms of the final client disintermediation and other key value drivers. So I will leave it now to Martin to moderate the panel.
Thank you, Pedro, and thank you all for a very exciting morning. It's true inspiration to hear the different dimensions and different perspectives on the mobility. And great to have you here. I hope that we're going to have an exciting discussion. So I think you've been listening in this morning and listened to the different speakers around the perspective from a city, perspective from a platform developer, and startup, and etc. What's your reflections and thinking from listening in this morning?
First of all, good morning, and thank you to UI for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, being part of this industry, I must say that I've heard before what was being said here. I think there is always something new you capture, but of course I think there is a common point to every pitch, which is, well, the future will be very much different from what we experience today. And I think that forces to all of us, the agents in the industry, and I consider Lisplan an active agent in this industry, to reflect on what will be our future role. And that's very much what occupies a lot of my time thinking, in the thinking mode, is what will be the role of a fleet manager in the future. It's a perspective which was not presented here before, and I mean, I have a strong belief that there will be a role for an integrator. Somebody has to integrate all these services, which by definition are somehow scattered. Somebody has to own the cars. Somebody has to take the economic risk on those cars. Somebody has to manage it. And I believe that's very much the present role, and that will very much be the future role of a fleet manager. I think there is a kind of consensus around what stands for the acronym CASE, so connected, shared, autonomous, electrical. I think there is a wide consensus, but I very much like the disruptive view of Alexandre, that maybe the future is not predictable, and probably we are all betting in the same scenarios, but there will be something coming out of nobody knows where, and that will fully disrupt the future of mobility. And that's very much the $1 million question, and that's what I see probably as of most value in today's presentations.
So what is the next fridge?
Yeah.
It's exciting. Thank you. If we go to you and your reflections and thinking of listening into the different perspectives here this morning.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Congratulations to EY for this outstanding event and also for this amazing notebook. I'm still learning how to use it. It's high-tech again. Made in Portugal, by the way, I just noticed. Anyway, so, well, I think that we had here a unique opportunity to see different point of views of what the future of mobility might be. And there's a man at the angle. What we notice is that we're having a much more complex ecosystem. We have a lot of players. You mentioned even the client is different in terms of what he wants and what's he's willing to buy, if he's going to buy anything anyway. We often understood from the deputy mayor and from cities that we need to be much more focused on who's providing what. Not only who owns the system, who provides the cars, but the modal split is fairly imbalanced. So we do need to change that. And when we look at the different presentations we had here, I think we all agree that technology and digitalization, which is this fourth revolution that we're facing, it will be part of the solution. Now, case. So we've seen here 2 or 3 things that were very, very focused here in this event. One is about the future of the car, so connected, autonomous, shared, but that's just the car. And the car is just one of the instruments that we discussed here with mobility. Now, I come from the public transport sector, so I have to say something about it, which is we will be probably the ones that will innovate less in terms of the main role that we play, but we will have to integrate more with whoever will be the owner and the leader in that. That's one of the key issues, is we're not sure about who will be able to integrate that. Now, someone here shared, as I think Alexander did, that some big players are joining forces to maybe provide that, but we're not sure about the future. So if I may conclude, I would say 2 things. One, it's getting more complex from the side of the business, the side of the products. We have more products, soft products and hard products. I think public transports will play a dominant role if we want to have sustainable cities. In Lisbon, we transport 1 million trips a day, so it's not a niche market, it's mass production. And we still seen this morning that we have very low figures compared to other cities in terms of modal split. So we have to do more on that. And I think that integration will take some time, but it will be based on our smartphones. So there's a lot of things to do that also. They're not ready for what we think would be a smart, seamless trip. NFC is not open to all technologies. The systems that we use in public transport are not all ready to read and validate. So we have a way to go. But I think, once again, we need to integrate more, and hopefully someone will lead that journey.
Thank you very much. Exciting but challenging future.
Oh, very challenging.
If we give the same question to you, just around your reflection and conclusion, listening into the different speakers this morning. You spoke yourself, so...
Yeah. So my point of view, it's a little bit about Antonio, talk about it, and it's see how the future goes in terms of the cars, and about how fleet manager will support and see how other players can bring to the market. Our view is not only be the fleet managers can support and support all of the evolutions, because there is also other part about connecting the customer and be the front of the service, that our view is be from other players that today are seeing already the market, the mobility market as an opportunity. About the integration, we already have a good network, a good experience with ATMs in Portugal and banks. It already exists. It's easily replicated. And about the roaming and telecommunications, it's easy also to have a good connection about different players with different experience can together have a good vision about the shared mobility and the mobility.
Thank you. I think what was mentioned quite many times during this morning was that there is a very bright and exciting future. I think you mentioned that here as well, but also that there are a number of challenges for us to realize that vision. If you were to mention one of these barriers that you think is the most critical to attack and to address in the next coming years here, what would that be, do you think? Looking at all of you.
If I can follow the same order.
Please.
I believe one of the things that it is critical for turning some of these trends into massive mainstream future ecosystems is economic sustainability. Because we talk about many agents in this ecosystem, but I believe there is no single one which has yet turned this new mobility intervention into an economically sustainable model.
On scale, you mean?
On scale.
Yeah, on scale, yeah.
And I believe that's one of the main challenges, and maybe it's one of the main roles also for a company like Lisbon, is making the subscription of all the integrated into a viable economic proposition, which, let's say, self-fulfills the ambitions of sustainability for all agents. All these trends are exponential, and the value of these agents and of these projects is very much based on growth, but it's not yet based on profitability. And I mean, the scalability of all these that we have been hearing during the morning needs an economic model which gives sense to all of it from the monetary perspective.
Very good point. In what time period would you foresee that as realistic?
I believe it's a bit the chicken and the egg.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the lack of economic sustainability of some of these players can have an influence in how rapidly they can scale up operations. So I think it's definitely a question for all agents and needs probably a different balance than the one there is today.
Any other comments on key barriers to overcome here?
Well, I think one of the issues that I would love to overcome is that I would like that people would join the ecosystem. So become a client of this club, the club of urban mobility, which means that one of the biggest barriers is to join in. It's to come in. I mean, maybe many of the people that are in this room are not members of the club, which means they don't use on a daily basis the system, the public transport systems. Why? Because you need to get in. And getting in is, for me, a barrier. And the system is getting more complex. It's not only using the metro or the bus or the trains, it's also using everything else. Even if it's not sustainable, they exist, they're there. And so I think one of the barriers is how can we do that so that people feel like in one step they join the club, they're in. And now they're free to decide if they want to take a bus, a metro, a taxi, a scooter, whatever.
It should be easy.
Excuse me?
It should be easy.
It should be much easier, and it's because once you're in, you feel like first of all you understand that the system is much better than it's what your perception, and second, you start testing new products because you're in, you don't have to overcome that. Now I understand that maybe Martin, you mentioned the new generations that just went in, they're coming in. And they feel differently, but we need to cover all generations, okay? And I know that most of the things that we do today are based on a smartphone, but I want to be sure that a young kid that is 4 or 5 years old is in the system too. And I don't want to force him to have something very expensive, high-tech. Well, your kids already have it, from what I understand. It's unavoidable, but I want to be sure that that's not a barrier. And it's a big challenge.
Talking about, because and a couple of the speakers mentioned that as well, talking about the end consumer and as you mentioned, how to cover all the different segments of the end consumers and so on. What role will they play, do you think, in the development of mobility? We talked a lot about here today about technology, how cities drive, but thinking about the end consumer, how much of this development will be dependent on the end consumers and their behavior, so to say?
Well, it's a chicken and the egg. What do you do first? Do we follow the consumer and then try to... But I think what we've seen is that the products come out first and the consumer adapts quickly.
Yep.
But we have very different types of consumers that we want to be sure they join this dynamic, this mobility of the future. We have elderly people, which are getting a very important piece of the pie, because we're living more and more, and we're having more and more healthy years to come, and we want to be sure that we have mobility and accessibility. We have the young generation. As you mentioned, they're not really interested in possessing something that is expensive, that you have to get rid of it at the end of the day, so they want to do something different. And then you have the general commuters that just want to be sure they have an efficient trip, because time is, Eduardo said, is a key issue. What do you do with time? In between, as we've seen, the technology will come out, and I'm not sure if what we've seen in the different movies that were shared today, where you have an autonomous car, where you can do other things and value time while moving. But if I use a lot of public transports, I came by train. I usually come by train, and I see a big difference, is that the trip is, you're still in your own ecosystem with your mobile phone or your iPads, although moving, which is different from a few years ago where you were moving, waiting to reach the destination. So that change will happen with case, right? So there's a lot of things that might happen with a customer, with a client, but I think it's a chicken and egg. Who will lead I think technology will lead.
Yep.
And then we'll get in. Oh, they.
Oh, they.
They. I'm not sure if I'm part of that anymore.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
To you also, it was an exciting presentation you had before, and you mentioned also a number of use cases you're working on, and around different platforms for realizing mobility. What is your view on how these platforms actually can, to your point as well, be scalable and actually be accessed for more people, more company, and so on in the future? What is the critical point for realizing that, do you think?
I think the most critical point is the wall we have and the barrier we have when we want to start to move. So every time in all operator we want to use that kind of mobility, we need to create an account, have all onboarding, and sometimes this could be a huge. Sometimes we forget and stop that registration because it's so hard and so many players that it's very difficult to get in. What I think is that the technology will support and integrated with several players will easily give to the customer a easy way to get in and to move between different type of transportations. I was talking with someone during the coffee break, and I see that mobility and all this integration in the city could be far, but today there is companies for their employees are seeing mobility in a different way. It's not only the car being part of the employer, but also they have package of transportation, public transportation that will help and support the way this change will have in the city. Today, one of the most amazing cases that we have in Turkey, they started to be a car sharing operator with 200 vehicles, and today they are already integrated with public transports in the city, and that's the next phase is giving all a package for their private customers.
Exciting. I think we are starting to run out of time here. I know that probably a lot of people have exciting meetings here after this session as well on the topic of mobility, I guess. We would like to thank you very much. Was excited to talk to you and get your perspectives on the mobility and the morning we have had here. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we are on time, a couple of minutes before 1 p.m. So just to wrap up, I would like to thank you all for your presence here. I'm a bit biased, but I think it was really an inspiring morning on such an interesting topic, and one of the sector that has been most dynamic in Portugal. So a pleasure to have such relevant players in mobility in this room. And please join me in thanking the speakers and the panel participants of today for sharing the thoughts and visions about the future. Thank you and have a good day.
We'll push it all aside and we can share